Philippine Economic Society Annual Meeting and Conference. Sponsored by the Philippine Competition Commission, this panel session is titled Competition, Inclusion, and Growth in the Post-Pandemic Digital Era. I am Sarah Dawi-Ducanes, Associate Professor at the University of the Philippines School of Economics, and this session's moderator. This COVID-19 pandemic has fast-tracked the development and adoption of digital technologies, and the changes brought about by greater digitalization are expected to stay on even after the pandemic. While there are a lot of benefits to be had from greater digitalization, such as new employment opportunities, reduced transactions costs, and shortened supply chains, greater facilitation of economic and social connections, and even value generation, faster digitalization has exposed a digital divide between and within societies. Now, amidst the benefits of digitalization, there have also been concerns regarding the increased concentration of technology and income gains in certain industries and sectors, leading to questions regarding the role of the state in the economy and in distributing the gains from digital innovation. This panel session, sponsored by the PCC, aims to explore competition issues in relation to the digital economy and the competition policy measures that would help ensure greater digital inclusion to support a more inclusive economic recovery. We are privileged to have with us this morning a distinguished panel of speakers, and we have one main presentation to be followed by brief presentations of 4 panel discussants. After this, there will be a 15-minute roundtable discussion followed by an open forum where we will entertain live questions and questions placed in the Q&A box below. We enjoin everyone to please refrain from clogging the chat box with unnecessary messages. Let us begin. Our main speaker, Dr. Tetsushi Sonobe, is the Dean and CEO of the Asian Development Bank Institute, or ADBI. The Tokyo-based think tank of the Asian Development Bank. He is a development economist and holds a PhD and MA in economics from Yale University and BA in economics from the University of Tokyo. He has conducted empirical studies of the roles played by industrial clusters, social and human capital, entrepreneurship training, and competition policy and inclusive economic development in developing countries in Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Central America. He is a founding board member of the Japanese Association for Development Economics, or JADE, and a recipient of the Nikkei Book Publication Prize and Masayoshi Ohira Memorial Prize. Before joining ADBI in April 2020, he was vice president of the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, or GRIPS, in Tokyo for 6 years and a professor of economics for 30 years at GRIPS Tokyo Metropolitan University and the Foundation for Advanced Studies on International Development. He was a visiting scholar at ADB in Manila intermittently in 1995 and 1996, and a visiting researcher at the UP School of Economics in 1997. Now, here to give us the context of how digitalization in transforming societies and the role of competition policy in bridging the digital gap for an inclusive and sustainable recovery post-COVID-19. Everyone, please give a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Tetsushi Sonobe.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers or participants, good morning. Thank you very much, PCC, for inviting me to be part of this very important session. And talking at the annual meeting of the Philippine Economic Society has been my dream since I lived in an apartment near the main gate of the Ateneo in 1997 for I think 7 months. So my for me the Philippines is a kind of second home country, and maybe Marikina is the second hometown, maybe somewhere between the Sumulong Highway and Marcos Highway. And also maybe the Tai Reserve would be my third hometown. Okay, so I think my role in this session is to provide kind of general introduction to the topic to the audience. And I do so by dancing, following faithfully to the following the choreography made by the organizer. I mean, next page, please. I mean, answering these three sets of questions given by the organizer. So first question is, how is digitalization transforming society in the context of jobs, education, economic value creation, and the delivery of essential public services? Next page, please. So in the case of job, because of digitalization, gig economy was born. So of course, even before digitalization, some people were willing to take short-term jobs as freelancers. But the digitalization made it much easier to matching such people with the demand for their services. Likewise, in the case of shopping, e-commerce sites were born. And then the great advantage of this is very easily to match the buyers and sellers, large scale. And also, those who want to buy something very valuable, and then something that for which the kind of hidden quality or not easily observable quality like durability and safety important. And then this digitalization provides a good solution. So solution eventually is a kind of reputation about the provider's willingness and the capability of providing high quality goods and services. And also it is important to have a way to sanction, penalize the bad suppliers. So with reputation and sanction methods, there will be trust. And then in the past, such trust could be, built up within the community using kind of community mechanism in which people can penalize other people not only by stopping purchase, but also by using the kind of human relations. Like if someone doing bad behavior, the other people who are friends or relatives or friends of friends, and those people will never talk to the bad person. So that kind of sanction was also possible. But now, in the world of digital platform, the review sites rating will provide that kind of very large scale reputation mechanism. And then sanction is easy, just to exit from that particular bad suppliers. So this works between the not only the consumers and manufacturers, but between the manufacturers like part suppliers and assemblers. And also hidden effort. This is more like a principal agent problem. But before, the community mechanism was important. And in the case of Toyota, for example, they tried to make a kind of atmosphere of similar to the family. So Toyota as an assembler is a kind of family head. And then the suppliers would be a first layer, and maybe even the second layer suppliers would be regarded as a family member. So that kind of community played an important role. But now there is another type of trust. So in China, digitalization played a big role in the development of industries because of this kind of trust revolution. Next page, please. And then also payment and settlement became much easier now because of the digital methods. Thus, digitalization has reduced transaction cost very much. And then this, of course, increased volume and scope of transactions. So in other words, digitalization has expanded commerce greatly, which means the more and more division of labor and specialization. And then some types of economic historian would call this type of economic growth Smithian growth because Adam Smith emphasized the importance of the division of labor. And also expansion of commerce, of course, creates a lot of jobs. But also digitalization has improved productivity and quality, which can be called Schumpeterian growth because Schumpeter emphasized the innovation. And creating value. Of course, higher efficiency or productivity may not necessarily mean the increase in jobs, but maybe jobs would be also created. So examples of this Schumpeterian growth due to digitalization would be remote work and the fragmentation of production, because from the headquarters in the US, I can easily give the instruction and monitoring with the subsidiary factories in somewhere in developing world. And also IoT, artificial intelligence, big data, those things would lead to the fourth industrial revolution. And there are more my type of business, like small shoemakers and garment producers. For them, the big problem has been that they didn't even keep the records of transactions. But now they can use cloud services like a cloud accounting. So without keeping record, they didn't know whether they are making money or losing money. And then they did a kind of stupid investment, believing that they are becoming rich because they are receiving a lot of orders, but they are not receiving money yet. And then try to purchase something expensive, and then the business is go bankruptcy. But now cloud accounting will stop such stupid mistakes. Okay. So the business for SMEs or micro, small, medium enterprises can be more stable. Next page, please. Economic welfare improves also through consumption smoothing. I mean the saving, borrowing, and lending. And fintech will help them in many ways. And also fintech increases investment. Here, maybe the one item like not sending or receiving, of course, expense, of course, crowdfunding, social lending. On the next one, fintech extract big data through these services and the SNS also to assess creditworthiness of borrowers. So this would reduce the risk of default. So these are all the beneficial things. So next page, please. Okay. And then other areas like impacts on education and essential public services delivery. Yeah, these are all obvious. So even in the education sector, EdTech was born. And then for public services, e-governance or digital government, was born. And in sum, we are seeing digital transformation in most aspects of human life. Okay, so next page, please. So in this way, digitalization is becoming the kind of very important part of our life. Maybe in almost every aspect of our life. So we cannot do without digital technologies now. So we are so dependent. Now, how can digital? Second question is, how can digital transformation benefit everyone, especially at the time of pandemic? What measures can be put in place to narrow the inequalities in digital access and readiness? Of course, next page, please. Of course, the answer is digitalization cannot make everybody better off because digitalization cannot benefit those who do not use digital technology. Digital divide, by the way, means that there emerge both those who benefit from digitalization and those who cannot benefit from digitalization. And then the reason why there are some people who do not use digital technology is that some people are digital illiterate, or some people cannot have or do not have good access to digital infrastructure. But also, there are fear of leakage of private information, and there are people who care about invasion of data privacy, and also people fear cybercrime. So this third point will become important for the later argument. And then digitalization creates new industries. And then, like any other, technical disruption or the emergence of great new technology, digitalization creates winners and losers. And then in this bread point, I emphasize the new industries replacing old industries. Even though there are some cases in which both the new and the new industries find it profitable to complement each other's strengths and weaknesses, like fintech companies and conventional banks now doing working together in some areas. But digitalization will also make winners and losers within, even within newly emerged industries, emerged due to digitalization. So in this sense, digitalization cannot make everyone happier than before. To make most people better off, digitalization must be accompanied by leveling the playing field, meaning investment in digital literacy and digital infrastructure. And also to help those losers, there need to be casting social safety nets. Next page, please. And then the third question is there a role for competition policy to bridge the digital gap for an inclusive and sustainable recovery post-COVID-19? What are the competition implications of going digital for the country? Next page, please. So as I said, many people are so dependent on digital technologies and the digital platforms. And then greater use of the first arrow is a kind of should be removed, sorry. So there are several circular causal effects, meaning there are some kind of scale economies and scope economies. For example, if we use digital platform more, and then they will have a bigger data, and then bigger data used to find out which consumer prefer what type of goods and services, and then will kind of they can provide the advertisement, pinpoint type advertisement, sometimes which make us feel a bit nervous. Also, greater service and then greater number of users, which will make the matching between the sellers and winners easier. So the greater benefits, which will make number of users bigger. So this kind of circular causation exists. So because of such scale economy and also scope economy, the kind of monopoly power will emerge. And then this is already happening. And then now we may have to add another cause of digital divide. So meaning tying and other restraints of trade that destroy the business of other service providers. And also the price may become very high, which will exclude many consumers from the benefit of digitalization and so on. So in short, competition policy will play an important role in bridging digital divide, which will emerge not because of the digital illiteracy or lack of digital infrastructure, but because of the behaviors of digital platforms. Next page, please. And then, as I said, the problem is already happening, and then there are already kind of investigation by competition agencies against the big techs. Like EU has investigated into Google's possible abuse of its dominant position in markets since 2010. And then recently, EU is prepared to force big technology companies to share their customer data with smaller rivals. And this year, US judge on Monday, in the case of the Facebook, Facebook merged Instagram, WhatsApp. So that problem went to the court, and more recently, U.S. Department of Justice has accelerated its 2-year-old antitrust probe on Apple Inc. in the last several months, increasing the likelihood of lawsuit. So there we will see more and more of this kind of news in the future. Next page, please. And then what can this kind of problem imply to the Philippines? Okay. So going digital is, I think, the necessary step toward the kind of economic prosperity of the people in this country. So, stopping going digital would mean kind of self-defeating choice. So we have no other way other than going more and more digital. But then we have to fight against problems due to the monopoly power. So we need to confront big techs to save domestic consumers, farms, workers, and freelancers. So for this purpose, we need to strengthen the capability of competition agencies. And then for that purpose, we need to work with counterparts in the neighboring countries, multilateral organizations, especially OECD. And then we need to increase awareness of consumers, farms, workers, freelancers, and policymakers. And then we review the competition policy of the country, maybe strengthen the competition policy, competition law, and so on. So this is my general guidance or introduction of the topic to the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sonobe, for an enlightening presentation. To our participants, again, should you have any questions, you may place them in the Q&A box below, and we will get to them during the open forum, or you may also opt to air your questions orally during the forum. Now, we move on to our panel discussion. Our first panel discussant is Ms. Ee Kia Ing, who is the Assistant Chief Executive for Policy, Business, and Economics at the Competition and Consumer Commission of Singapore, or CCCS. Ms. Ee Kia is trained in both the competition economics and law and has private as well as public sector experience in competition policy, economics, and law. Prior to CCCS, Ms. Ing co-headed the competition and regulatory practice at one of the largest law firms in Singapore for about 7 years. She has also spent 8 years at the telecommunications regulators in Singapore and Hong Kong, working on a wide range of competition and regulatory issues. Our second panel discussant is Dr. Christopher Monterola, who is the head of the Asian Institute of Management's Aboitiz School of Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship, the Executive Managing Director of the Analytics, Computing and Complex Systems Laboratory, holder of the Aboitiz Professorial Chair in Data Science and the Academic Program Director of the newly launched Doctor of Philosophy in Data Science program of AIM, the first and only PhD in data science program in the Philippines and among the few in Asia. He was recently conferred the rank of academician by the National Academy of Science and Technology, or NAST. Dr. Monterola is a well-published scientist. He has published in many of the most prestigious journals in complex systems, artificial intelligence, transportation, aging, demographics, and basic research. He has also led multi-million-dollar R&D projects with various sectors of the society, and has also been responsible for training and mentoring young scientists and data scientists on an international level. Our third panel discussant is Mr. Benjamin Azada, who is an established professional with over 20 years of experience. He has just recently transitioned from consultancy to industry, joining Converge, the fastest growing broadband provider, in April 2020. He is designated as the Chief Strategy Officer of Converge ICT Solutions Incorporated. Prior to joining Converge, Mr. Azada was the consulting managing principal and a management board member of PwC Philippines and a partner of PwC's Southeast Asia consulting practice. Mr. Azada started in PwC in 1996 as a consultant, undertaking transformation projects in the telecommunications sector. He was assigned to PwC's Hong Kong unit from 2001 to 2014, leading strategy and business transformation projects for clients across Greater China and Southeast Asia with focus on the ICT sector. Mr. Azada holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Engineering from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and a PG DIP in Business Administration with merit from the University of Durham, UK. And last but not the least, our fourth discussant is Dr. Arsenia M. Balisacan, who is serving as the first chairperson of the Philippine Competition Commission. Before his appointment, he was the Philippine government's chief economist, serving as Social Economic Planning Secretary and concurrent Director General of the National Economic and Development Authority in 2012 to 2016. Dr. Balisacan was a faculty member of the University of the Philippines for over 3 decades. He served as Dean of the UP School of Economics and Director Chief Executive of the Southeast Asian Regional Center for Graduate Study and Research in Agriculture, or CIRCA. Before joining the UP faculty in 1987, he was Research Fellow at the East-West Center in Honolulu and Economist at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. He has authored and co-edited 7 books, and published both locally and internationally close to 100 academic and policy papers on various development issues, and has published in prestigious international journals. Chairperson Balisacan holds a PhD in economics from the University of Hawaii, a Master of Science in Agricultural Economics from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. And now here to give us an international, country-specific perspective of what has been done in the competition policy arena in Singapore, let us welcome Ms. Ee Chian Ing.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much to PCC for this invitation. Like my last international trip out of Singapore before the pandemic hit was actually to Manila to, attend a conference together with colleagues from PCC. So it's a great pleasure today to be able to speak and support this workshop today. So thank you very much. I'm going to share a bit about Singapore's experience with the digital markets. I think this is a very complex area, and like what Dr. Sonobe was talking about, there are many things happening. If you open the papers every day, there's some decisions, there are some, legislation being proposed around the world. And I think in Singapore, we are also keeping a very close watch in terms of what is happening around the world, as well as what is happening in our local markets. So perhaps I could start the story from 2015. So I think in 2015, e-commerce started taking a very fast pace development in Singapore, right? We started off with, entry of companies like Grab and Uber. They turned a lot of markets upside down, right? They went into taxi hailing, and then subsequently we see things like, food delivery, e-commerce platforms, marketplaces, and so forth. And I think it is with this focus that we at CCCS decided that we need to keep a closer watch in terms of what's happening in the market. So in 2015, we started off with very much looking at e-commerce, because that was really the big thing happening in the market back then. So we look at things like delivery, we look at things like transport, we look at things like e-commerce in general, right? Then subsequently, after we finished one area, the next thing came. It was big data. There was a lot of discussion about what big data is, algorithms, etc. 2018, we looked at things like data portability, because that was then another big topic about, to what extent is data portability going to be a solution to solving some of these problems and market power within digital markets. Last year, we did another study again, but this time more specific on e-commerce platforms. And one particular area that was of great interest to us was that what we are experiencing and seeing in Southeast Asia, which is super apps, or companies that are entering into multiple markets, perhaps using one app or even several apps, but closely connected. So I think in Philippines, you will also have companies like Grab that are offering multiple services. So I think one of the interesting things that we realize is that besides e-commerce, big data, etc., I think one other area that I thought was useful to bring up today is really in terms of consumer protection. So I think for CCCS, we are not only a competition authority, we are also a consumer protection agency. So at one of the areas after we inherited the consumer protection powers and so-called oversight in 2018 was to also bring consumer protection into the fold as we look at digital markets. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we understood is really what type of consumer protection issues are coming up in digital markets. And so in 2019, we started a study looking into things like price transparency. So I think the study didn't specifically just look at online market, but online market was one area that keep coming up, right? There's a lot more because of disclosure issues, there's a lot more issues arising from practices such as misleading, drip pricing and so forth, which are more common in online markets than in offline markets, right? So I think we then issued some guidelines to basically suppliers in terms of how they should be safeguarding price transparency, right, when they sell both online and offline. So I think just very quickly to where we are now, we following our e-commerce platform study, which we completed last year, one of the things that we realized was that while we did not identify major competition issues that we couldn't really deal with under our existing framework and guidelines, one of the things that came up very strongly was the need for our guidelines to very clearly deal with online markets, right? So I think like what Dr. Sonobe mentioned, there is the network effect, there is the scale issues that come up very clearly in online markets, two-sided markets or multi-sided markets, which are not previously dealt with so clearly within our guidelines. So things like market definition, how do you assess market power within such markets? All these issues come to front, right? And the industry was calling for us to say, hey, as the competition authority, you really need to provide more guidance. And I think that's one thing that we did with our guidelines review. So I think we reviewed our guidelines, we put out proposed amendments for public consultation. And we are hoping that, the finalized guidelines will be out hopefully by the end of this year. So I think maybe just touching very quickly in terms of the pandemic, whether that has changed anything at the CCCS. I think for us, the pandemic in Singapore has curtailed movement significantly. So we had a period of lockdown last year, and even now, while generally movement restrictions have been removed, but there are still some restrictions. And one of the consequence of that is really that there is a lot more so-called commerce that's taking place online, right? Consumers are buying a lot more things online, even ordering food online, getting delivery and so forth. So I think some of these issues once again means that we really need to put out the guidance and we need to react much faster compared to perhaps before the pandemic. I think one of the things that we found in our experience with dealing with the food delivery sector was that we intervened twice. One was in 2016 and one was just last year. Both of which in the same sector involving food delivery. But I think there was a slight difference in approach. In 2016, because the sector was still very, very new, right? There was exclusivity agreements that were being put in place by one of the big companies. But because the market was still very dynamic, there were lots of changes. What we did that we did not actually go ahead with an investigation, but we signpost very early to tell the companies that exclusivity will be problematic once there is market power. If we find somebody who is dominant and putting in place exclusivity agreements, that's when we will investigate and we will put an end to that, right? So we signpost quite early, and the industry actually self-regulated. They changed their behavior quite quickly, right? But in last year, when there was another complaint, but this time slightly different nature, but similarly, accusing, blockage of new entrants, I think that's where we started investigation. And interestingly, before we concluded our investigation, the companies involved decided that they will stop their potentially problematic practices. So I think maybe to end my presentation now, I would say that one lesson that we have learned is that one, we need to react very quickly to online markets. Two, sometimes it may be too early in our view to intervene because the market is still changing so rapidly, but coming out to signpost very quickly in terms of taking a view of what could be potentially problematic very quickly, that really helped to guide the industry. So thank you very much. I'll stop my sharing at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Ng. We'll have more opportunity for a greater discussion later on. To give us a brief presentation of the developments in big data analytics and artificial intelligence and the relevant challenges for the Philippine competition policy, let us welcome Dr. Christopher Monterola. Dr. Monterola, your 7.5 minutes start.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. And again, thank you for the Philippine Economic Society and PCC for the invitation for today. There are just 2 points that I would like to make. One is a fact, and the other one is a fact and an advocacy at the same time. The first one is that big data and AI are already reshaping the way we do business across all major sectors. And I will try to illustrate and highlight this in the next few slides. And my second point is that micro, small, and medium enterprises that comprises more than 99% of the enterprises registered in the Philippines need access to AI to level the playing field. And I will give my perspective on this in the succeeding slides. So first off, Industry 4.0 is mainly driven by the presence of big data that can now be stored and now can be crunched, resulting to not just information, but at the same time, creating business value to the different stakeholders. Just to give a very quick overview, 90% of our data has been created in the last 3 years, which also translates to the fact that every 3 years, 9 to 10 times of the total data that we have will be multiplied by 9 to 10 times. In fact, currently, the most amount of energy consumptions are not because of mechanical motion, but because of information or data. The storage price has decreased dramatically. In the 1970s, 1 megabyte of data cost $1 million US. Now this is 10 to the negative 5 USD. So the storage price decreased by 10 to the 11. So you have a lot of data that can now be stored, and this storage can be crunched by a very powerful computer at a cheaper price. The first supercomputer cost $6 million, and not even including inflation, this is 20,000 times more expensive than the iPhone, the most recent iPhone, that works at 10 million times faster to the first supercomputer that can do 10,000 floating point operations per second. Now the iPhone 13 can do more than 32 billion floating point operations per second. So again, this is the thing. Big data and AI are already reshaping the way we do business across all major sectors. And in fact, the one that greatly impact or disrupts what is happening right now is artificial intelligence. So this is the ABC of things that are impacting the different businesses in the world. Artificial intelligence, more than 70%, blockchain technology, and cloud computing. And as you probably, since most of the people here are from economics, note that in 1937, the average lifespan of companies of S&P 500 is about 75 years. Now, because of this disruption, this is down to 12 to 15. And S&P 500 companies are among the biggest companies, actually, the top 500 companies, biggest in the world. So when more than 3,000 individuals were asked what is the impact of AI adoption, in 2017, 3,000 C-level executives said that it will impact both their offerings and processes by a factor of 60% by 2022. 2 years later, when they conducted the same survey, they put this at 93%. Okay, this is 2019, so this is by 2024. Because artificial intelligence is not just a tool now, but a strategic asset of a company. So therefore, the question is, will artificial intelligence impact competition? Because the thing is, rebuilding a team of data scientists is a very expensive thing, and the ROI is not guaranteed. So there is a natural advantage for bigger conglomerates to actually make you to be actually ahead of everyone else if they will be able to make use of artificial intelligence. I will go to that. That is my second most important point in my talk. But just to give you a perspective on this thing, government now see AI as a nation-defining capability, much like oil and the strength of army used to be the nation-defining capability of different countries. It is expected that $15.7 trillion will be added by AI in the economy by 2030. And I believe that micro, small, and medium enterprises, which serve 62% of our employment in the Philippines, for example, is coming from this. MNCs only accounts for 2%, with 9% coming from the government. the other 13% are 13 to 17% are underemployed, okay, it can indeed impact the different industries in the country and the level, how fair is the level of the playing field. Just to give you an idea, okay, these are the works that we have completed since 2018. This is my team. This is our team at AIM. We've worked with and completed more than 42 projects, and 17 will start by January. The annual revenue that we have generated for those companies that are profit-seeking is more than $80 million. This is what AI can do. And these numbers, this revenue generated, was not given or approximated by us. This was given to us by the CFOs of those different companies. In this, as a result of this, we work with the DTI together, of course, with Secmon Lopez to actually have the National AI Roadmap. And I would like to end on this particular perspective. The idea of the National AI Roadmap is hopefully, okay, coming from 3 different DTI secretaries, including, of course, academician Arsenio Balisacan, who is the PCC chairperson, National Scientist Pabella, many others. Okay, the National AI Roadmap has 42 strategic tasks. But one of the things that I would like to highlight, and this is included in, this is my one of our advocacy, is for MSMEs to have an access to artificial intelligence by creating a national AI center. This is a very important thing to level the playing field. That there are, and this works as a kind of by economy of scale. This is something that we have not invented. This already exists in Singapore, Korea, Japan, and many other countries who are making sure that they will be competitive in the so-called Industry 4.0. And the best way to do this is to let the enterprises, the big conglomerates, to actually fund this. We don't want this to be in the under government institutions. Actually, we get that perspective from Chairman Balisacan, because we want to give our data scientists world-class salary, or world-class data scientists, hopefully we can get with giving them world-class salary, and get the money from these conglomerates whom we believe are we need to activate them so that the playing field can be labeled at the same time. And so far, we are getting very good traction on this. Hopefully, by first quarter next year, we will be able to start this fully driven by the industry. Because the problem is, if we do this with under government salary standardization law, it will defeat the purpose of using AI, which is the most important component of AI is about agility and being able to make a decision in a very fast and accurate manner. So lastly, okay, I would like to show this photo. I'm a physicist by training. It is unimaginable for me 2 decades ago, I graduated 2002 for my PhD in physics, for the geeks to actually be part of the things that can change the perspective of the conglomerates. But this is an example. Now we work with the Ayala. You can see here probably the top 50 taxpayers of the country. You'll see at my back now the president of BPI. You will see here the entire BPI team. And this is probably one of the things that we can do to level the playing field, because the one that will level the playing field eventually will be the geeks in this era, in this Industry 4.0 era. And maybe if we can, the economists can convince them and give them a perspective on the business value and what they need to do in this time of days to make this country a better place, then I think that will be one way to make sure that we will be able to have a healthy competition in the field of the businesses that we have right now in the country. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah.
Thank you, Dr. Monterola. Now, to give us a brief discussion on the developments in the Internet Service Provider, or ISP and telecommunications sector, and some implications for the industry's competitiveness, please welcome with me Mr. Benjamin Azada.
Good morning to my fellow panelists, Dr. Docanes, and everyone in the audience. Just want to check whether people can hear me. Just say it, all right? Good, thank you. So I'll have a very short presentation on what I'm calling bridging the gap. And I called my presentation Bridging the Gap because I wanted to talk about how competition has helped bridge that gap between pent-up demand and inadequate supply for broadband internet in the Philippines. Now, broadband is kind of much more boring than what everyone else has been talking about. Dr. Sonobe talked about AI, fintech, Dr. Monterola, Industry 4.0, and AI. Of course, e-commerce and the competition policy challenges with respect to e-commerce, right? But I'm going to be talking about something much simpler, which is just we're a utility, we're the pipes that enable all of these other things, exciting things on top of that. So let me proceed. Let me talk about the supply-demand gap, right? There are significant demand tailwinds for broadband connectivity in our country. We have a very young internet-savvy population with the second largest BPO sector in the world and a large overseas diaspora. My mom's in the U.S., my sister's in the U.K., my brother's in the U.S. as well. And this spurs the need for Filipinos to keep in contact with their loved ones through Zoom, what we're doing now, or Skype. But on the other hand, the Philippines is still very much an underserved market. Our fixed broadband penetration is one of the lowest in the region. Latest figures there on the screen. And if you talk about fiber, which is the best technology so far for fixed broadband, it's even worse, right? We also have very comparatively slow and unreliable service compared to our neighbors. Recent changes and improvements in service notwithstanding. So that's the state of the industry, the supply-demand gap. And where did Converge come in, right? My bosses, Dennis and Grace Uy of Anthony Uy of Pampanga, not the other Dennis Uy of Davao. They started in this sector as a cable TV company over 2 decades ago. But Converge, as a telecommunication service provider, was founded in 2007 and started commercial operations in 2012. Given they had a franchise from Congress and the provisional authority from NTC, so fully licensed. And a year later, 2013, expanded to Metro Manila. And of course, the purpose of the company is to really fiber power the Filipino nation and to be to provide world-class services for people and businesses, right? We wanted to the mission in starting to Converge is to connect the unserved and underserved areas of the Philippines and providing the same level of service that our neighbors are able to do so in around Southeast Asia. When I came back to the Philippines 6 years ago from Hong Kong, I was paying 1,500 pesos for 1 gigabit per second. Come home and it was like, for the same price, I was paying, I was getting 10 Mbps, right? At least, over the past few years, that's now improved, and we're starting to approach, mature market or developed market speeds. And because the market opportunity is so big, it's really around investment into the networks and making sure that we price at a level that is affordable by the vast majority of Filipinos. And this is why we started with our 1,500 peso base plan, right? So this FiberX base plan, the one on the left, the box on the left, this a few years ago, this was at 20 Mbps, right? Still already the fastest in the market at that time. But then progressively, we increased speeds to 25 Mbps, and then last December 35, and then just a couple of days ago we announced our 50 Mbps speed increases, right? So this is now the standard, entry-level standard for broadband in the Philippines, which is twice the speed of what the U.S. FCC considers broadband, which is 25 Mbps. So we've upgraded speeds, but never increased price. We've also been investing a lot in port rollout, in network rollout, right? So we've been investing in a network through our Go National and Go Deep strategy. So we're now in many cities in Visayas and Mindanao, and we're also at the top, the northern Luzon. And here on the screen, you'll see some statistics to prove that we have been rolling out at a record pace. And as a result, because this is a case where if you build it, they will come. Over the last year, we increased our subscriber base by 75%. And if you look at the reports of other players in the market, they've seen similar growth, right? Because they have also, seeing us take the lead in investing in the network, they have also seen the opportunity and are doing the same. So, competition, I guess, is working for the benefit of the Filipino people, right? So how has competition, to answer the question more directly, in this sector address the digital divide and promote inclusive recovery? So I believe, by entering the market for broadband and offering value for money products, other players have also said that they need to do the same and have diversified also and focused, not maybe diversified, but started to focus on the fixed broadband space. Whereas probably in the past, the big what they saw as a bigger opportunity was in mobile, right? Now that the telco and ISP players have seen the opportunity in fixed broadband, they are all mounting an aggressive network expansion, and we're all entering previously untapped markets in the Philippines. And this, because of this, our services, telecom services, is being brought near and near to communities at the fringe. And for our part, we're supporting small and medium enterprises, which are the backbone of our economy, really to get back on their feet with new service packages that are fit for their needs and at the right price points, right? And for larger enterprises as well, we've been supporting them through the recovery by providing work from home packages for their employees. Last slide, promise. We're also doing our part in promoting inclusive growth through our partnerships with the Department of Education and the city and certain cities like San Juan here in Metro Manila and Imus in Cavite. We provided connectivity to public school systems in these cities, and we call this our Learn from Home program. We've also wired up several learning hubs of the Philippine Science High School, which now is a science high school system with many campuses around the country. But because students need to learn from home, not everyone has a connectivity at home. They come to these learning hubs to be able to learn remotely. So these developments in fixed broadband and in the provision of internet services, I think would have happened, and increased investment into this sector has happened because of the entrance of new players and because of the encouragement by the government and by the regulators to invest. So I believe that to the other speaker's point, that the right regulatory environment that encourages investment is going to help bridge that digital divide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Azada. Now to briefly give us a picture of the competition landscape and also discuss some ways by which competition policy may move forward and build back better, please welcome with me Chair Arsenio Balisacan.
Okay. Let me share my slide. Okay, do you see my slide?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you. All right, let me respond to the questions raised earlier. Let me first note some basic information here. Some of them were already raised earlier, but it's important to point out that relative to our Asian peers, the Philippine connectivity situation and the level of digital adoption leave much to be desired, as this was also pointed out by Benjamin earlier. In the last few years, it has lagged relative to its neighbors with respect to connecting its population to the internet and in making services such as fixed broadband available and affordable to subscribers. The BSP's 2019 Financial Inclusion Survey shed some more light on the country's context. No? As might be expected, those in socioeconomic groups A, B, and C, and residing in urban areas exhibit greater internet usage compared to socioeconomic groups D and E, as well as residents in rural areas. Usage is also higher in NCR, and balance of Luzon compared to Visayas and Mindanao. Clearly, there's a huge even geographic divide. The survey found that 69% of our adults own mobile phone, of which only 12% engage in financial transactions. We heard, although in the presentation of Governor Jokno this morning, we heard quite impressive improvement in the last couple of years. On the other hand, despite 50% of the adults using the internet, only a measly 9% of this internet using adults use it for financial transaction. A lack of awareness and a weak, slow, or lacking signals are reasons for this low level of digital adoption. The data from the National ICT Household Survey of the DICT and PSRTI is presented in a report by PIDS authored by Albert et al. Further confirm that this regional divide, as I pointed out earlier. Several regions lag far behind in terms of availability of 4G signals compared to 3G, and 4G is not even prevalent. However, it's also disturbing to note, that even in the main economic centers of NCR, Calabarzon and Central Luzon, as well as Central Visayas and Davao, majority of the surveyed households, or more than 50% of the population, still do not have an internet connection. So that's basically where we are in terms of the state of connectivity. Clearly, we have a lot of catching up to do, catching up with our neighbors, but also catching up of certain population groups with the rest of the population. Fortunately, significant reforms have been passed in the last few years. This includes the entry of the third telco player, which is seen to disrupt the long-held duopoly in the sector. The passage of the Mobile Number Portability Act strengthens consumer choice by making it easier for consumers to substitute providers. The DICT issued its common tower policy, while ARTA and other agencies issued their joint memorandum circular on the streamlining of permits for shared passive telecommunication tower infrastructure, or PTTIs. This greatly clarify and streamline regulatory processes and thus enable telco companies to rapidly deploy investments in supporting infrastructure, especially in underserved areas of the country. To illustrate, ARTA Director General Belhica stated that since the joint memorandum circular was signed in July 2020, at least close to 34,000 permits from PLDT, Smart, and Dito Telecommunity, as well as Globe, were released by September 2021. There is no doubt about it. There exists a huge appetite to serve the rapidly growing market conditional and enabling regulatory environment. Lastly, I should also note that the national competition policy was recently signed by President Duterte as an administrative order. Essentially, this directs agencies and institutions in the executive to embed pro-competition principles and considerations in their policies, issuances, and regulations to avoid creating harmful distortions to the competition landscape. Still, more work remains to be done if the telco sector is to fully realize its potential. The passage of the decades-old Public Service Act must be prioritized to usher in greater investments in the country or in the country's supporting infrastructure. We must pay attention to the needed reforms with respect to our utilization of spectrum and update our outdated rules governing this resource. This may require the passage of a comprehensive law to address its management, as well as initiatives to reallocate it to productive and efficient use or uses. In addition, further streamlining of regulatory processes for the deployment of telco equipment, including subjecting policies and issuances to competition impact assessment under the national competition policy, will be needed in order to enable investments and improve services. Now, building back better to sustain inclusive growth. Okay. We need to hasten the digital transition, and clearly that was recognized by our long-term vision that's seen and expressed in the Ambition 2040. That presents an opportunity to act on much-needed reforms. We need to attract investments and increase the competitive pressure on incumbents, and this must be paid or be made part and parcel of this development agenda to build back the economy better. All right, we know that poverty reduction responds to growth, economic growth, but we also know that the relationship weakens with high levels of inequality. We know what we have seen is that the pandemic has exacerbated or aggravated the inequalities and has created new ones, and that clearly has to do also with the differential access to technology, to ICT, the digital divide that I mentioned earlier. But as pointed out by the other speakers, the ICT is an enabler and a multiplier of opportunities. I think that's very clear in the presentation of Chris. But we need to ensure that such those opportunities are shared broadly across the population groups. All right. I think I should say that we would need to have a robust enforcement of competition law and policy during the recovery and beyond, to ensure and to enhance consumer welfare and build the economy back better. And I am running out of time, but in our subsequent exchanges, I could elaborate on the pillars of competition policy that allow us to build back better. And I'm talking about our advocacy functions, enforcement functions, and our merger control function. I stop there for now, Sarah, and I'll come back to some of the issues later.
Thank you, Chair Balisacan. Now we move on to our roundtable discussion, where we can go deeper with the various presentations that we heard earlier. Okay, so this question is for Dr. Sonobe, Ms. Ng, and Chair Balisacan, and one of you may answer this. Given the increasingly borderless nature of the digital technologies involved, would an international set of competition rules be necessary to level the playing field, increase local competition, reduce compliance and transactions costs, boost international trade, etc.? If so, what form and to which extent should coordination occur among the competition or antitrust agencies in different countries?
So,
Dr. Sonobe?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. Yes, I think that some harmonization of the competition rules among countries will be necessary. The reason why is maybe to make it simple. Yeah, just consider this very fact that global digital platforms can do business in the Philippines without having any physical premises in the country. So they can provide service from Jakarta or Seoul or the New York City for the consumers in the Philippines, and then collect money from them without having any physical premises in the Philippines. And then if those digital platforms actually did, kind of unlawful or anti-competitive conduct, then there must be some sanction or penalty or punishment. But how can the PCC or the Philippine government punish those service providers who do not have any places or any person in the Philippines? So there must be some kind of collaboration with other competition agencies in other countries. And in order to work together with those foreign competition agencies, there must be some harmonization of rules or the same definition of concepts and notions. So I think the complete harmonization will not be needed. Each country have different situations in the economy. So the rule as a whole would be different, but there must be some harmonization. Okay, so I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sonobe. Chair Balisacan, Ms. Ng, are there any concrete moves towards this greater harmonization of rules?
Yeah, yes, I think that's what's mentioned by Dr. Sonobe is I think it's important. There has been really a challenge for a big challenge for small and young competition authorities, like the Philippines, to address this global or trans-border issues, particularly with respect to the digital economy and the use of platforms. And I think that there are this has reached a high level of discussions among various international fora and agencies. For example, within the ASEAN, as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and there has been a move to launch the negotiation for the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Competition. At least that's a good start. I'm not saying that it's quite easy even within ASEAN because as you know, the culture, the legal history, the state of economic development are so diverse across these countries, and harmonizing this even competition law or competition policies has been a big challenge. At the very least, there's now an ongoing discussion among the member countries to set some common rules on what can be shared, what can be kind of capacity building that can be done across the countries, particularly the younger competition authorities. But I must say that I think the bigger challenge would be the fact that there are these legal differences across the countries. For example, with respect to business information, confidential business information, the treatment of privacy issue. The laws of the different countries are also different, and getting competition policy and particularly sharing of information come into play is such a challenge. But I think that first and foremost, and this was mentioned by Tetsushi earlier, that trust has to be built. And I think this is what we are trying to start at the PCC, where we, in the absence of agreements, formal agreements between and among the competition authorities in the region. At least we are trying to reach out to each other and build that trust so that we can have a more harmonized or even share information that is relevant to our respective agencies. No, that's how we are doing it, and I'm pretty also happy that and to note that ADBI and ADB have come to the fore of advancing our understanding of competition law and competition policy by initiating comparative work and what works and what does not, in a particular country or particular setting. And I hope that those initiatives will multiply.
Okay, thank you, Chair Balisacan. Ms. Ng, would you like to add to that?
I think maybe I would just add a very practical example that we actually at the competition authority level, what we have been doing. So I think even between Singapore, CCCS and PCC in Philippines, I think we have been talking at the staff level very frequently. And I think we are also doing the same within ASEAN with other, counterparts. And I think through such exchanges, whether it's specific to a case or it's more generally trying to understand what each other are doing in this space, I think that goes into what Chairman mentioned about the trust, the understanding, and establishing that relationship that when time comes, we know exactly who to look for, right? And we understand the thinking that each of us have with respect to specific issues. And I think that goes a long way in making sure that, we, without having formal laws, but our approaches are actually consistent and perhaps more aligned than what we could really pursue when we try to do a more formal way of doing things. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so now this question may be answered by Dr. Monterola, Ms. Ng, and Chair Balisacan. Governments and regulators are often at an informational disadvantage vis-a-vis IT firms. Accordingly, competition policy intervention, given its necessarily detailed and complex assessments, tends to lag behind technological innovations, given its dynamic or ever-changing nature, and may be rendered irrelevant or even do harm to the competition environment at the time it is actually enforced. Now, how can such informational disadvantage be mitigated? Dr. Monterola?
Maybe I can start. Of course, the first thing is that the government must be able to hire very competent individuals who will be at the top of the game. That's the most important thing. This is all about the regulator must be able, and this is one of the goals of the National AI Center. We should have a functioning government unit where the best of the best is located, and therefore there will be a clear the people who would like to commit all types of frauds will don't think again, knowing that there are regulators out there who are adept on what they would like they are trying to do. So I think that's the most important thing. And one of the problem right now, and this is one thing the PCC was able to do very, very well, is that that regulating body must be outside the say, for example, salary standardization law and all the bureaucracy that typically limits the speed and agility of our government institutions. I think that is first and foremost. And secondly, and this is another very important component, the ease of doing business will definitely make this easier, because then with the ease of doing business and with a very important transparent information going to everyone, not just the regulators, this will self-regulate itself. And I think that is the best way actually to impose competitions. And we've learned this from nature, that if it is regulated because people understand what is the principle, why are we doing this in the first place, to what extent, then it naturally has that ability to improve itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Monterola. Now, Chair Balisacan, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. It's a given to us that in government, not us in government, that we cannot match the salaries, the opportunity cost of the private sector, and that is clearly is evident even in PCC. No? We are losing people, even as they are just newly trained. No? But that does not stop us from keep on ramping up our training programs, such that both formal and informal, such that our people, especially those involved with investigation and merger control, merger review, are close at least to the top of the game. No? They're not so far behind. And the other one that I thought was useful, and which we initiated, was having this annual, this periodic conversation between regulators, academic, and the private sector, and that's the very the rationale for the Manila Forum, which we conduct every year. We really would want that forum to be a conversation among these three, players, stakeholders, so that we are always, seeing the same. We are part of that of that cycle that you described earlier, Tetsu and Chris. No, so that's one. I think that capacity building is a big challenge for us, but it must have to be done within PCC, both formal and informal capacity building. I stop for now. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Ms. Ng?
I would echo what Chairman say. It's like as government, we are always, short on budget, slower to hire, less attractive somehow. But I think we do try very hard to do what we can in terms of training, capacity building. I think one other point I wanted to add to what Chair said was that similarly in Singapore, we talk a lot. We try to bridge the gap with the help of the academia with the private sector. We have a lot of conversations with them, hoping that, if we talk to enough people, that will help to improve our understanding of the market. We do try put a lot of effort into market studies in trying to understand the market as it develops, so that, we don't come and before a case and suddenly within like 48 hours, we have to learn everything within that case and understand the market and have to make a decision very quickly. So we try to spread it out a bit more to do early study, so that it will enable us to be in that position when we need to make a decision. I think final point that I wanted to add is that within CCCS, what we have been trying to do is also to set up panels of experts. So these are panels whereby we try to identify experts early. So like, for example, in the area of AI, trying to help us understand algorithms, we do try to look for experts, both locally and internationally, such that when the time comes, if let's say we need to intervene in a case involving, this area, we know who to look for. We already have those conversations with these people. And so that, that will assist us to, look into matters more quickly. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Ng. Okay, so this next question is for Mr. Azada and Dr. Sonobe. Mobilizing public-private collaboration is crucial to bridging the financing, regulatory, and policy gaps. What do you think are some of the key opportunities for public-private partnerships?
Okay, you want me to go ahead, Dr. Sarah?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. So the UN Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development, they recently published the latest State of Broadband report, and in that report, the 2021 edition, they reported that innovative partnerships was really important for digital transformation, for especially a people-centered digital transformation. So I got two areas. I read that report and I said, okay, this is very applicable to the Philippines. I think one is infrastructure sharing. We don't want to also do overbuild, right? We don't want everyone build, all players build everywhere, right? So there are certain things that may be useful to share, right? I know the DICT, Department of Information and Communication Technology, have already been making progress on this. They have the Tower Watch. They also have this new memorandum circular on the issuance on permits, and also having the shared tower strategy, right? So also hoping that, towers don't really matter to fixed broadband player like us, but similar infrastructure like poles and conduits are. So, and I understand, they've the DICT is now launching a digital infrastructure monitoring system, so they know, where these infrastructure is, and so that there's transparency, and hopefully that can drive a bit more collaboration and probably sharing. But the other thing where I think maybe not current, not immediately, but over time, is for what the Broadband Commission says is connecting the unconnected, or what we call serving the unserved, in missionary areas. There, especially in the fixed space, there's no way we're going to be able to roll out fiber to every mountain, to every remote island. We've got over 7,000 islands. We can't roll out fiber to everywhere else. So there have to be alternative technologies, but some of these technologies may be expensive, right? And too expensive for residents in those missionary areas. So partnerships will definitely be required to finance these investments, and you have to make it. If it's still going to be a private player-led sector, then there has to be ways of partnerships to make it profitable for private players to go into these areas. There are examples in other markets, maybe not so much in broadband, but more on the old PSTN, landline, fixed line, universal service funds and the like. But there are models that we may want to explore here in the Philippines. I'll end it there.
Yeah, and then
Thank you.
I fully agree with Benjamin. Yes, that's the most important area, I think. And then the next question would be how to finance. But one way is to increase the awareness, because these days the ESG investment increasing rapidly in the Asia region. So the more awareness about the needs, and especially the digital platforms are kind of the beneficiaries of the expanding digital infrastructure. So they should pay to some extent. But in order to induce them to pay, maybe need to increase awareness and put pressure on them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sonobe. Now, Dr. Monterola, maybe you would like to pitch in. Earlier, we were talking about this AI roadmap where big firms are going to pitch in to construct this big data processing facility. Thank you.
Yeah. So yes, Dr. Sarah. This is my general perspective. Even I've worked in Singapore for more than 6 years, actually. Miss A-Star, during the start of the Smart Nation Initiative. And our goal is actually to engage both the public and the private agencies. And this is what we've learned. Even in a first world country, I've also worked in Germany, the problem of this type of partnership has always been because they have different KPIs, and sometimes these KPIs do not align. The KPI for the government is to create an impact, for industry to create value, and for the academia to build knowledge, create knowledge. And sometimes these three things are misaligned. But one of the things that we've learned is that if you put data at the center, these three things can all together be resolved. That government can create an impact, properly understanding how it is to make sure that the government and the public institutions and the industry can be regulated. But of course, obviously, you can create value for businesses, and everything we can work together properly. So I think that is one of the most important things, that there should be some level of transparency with respect to the data. And eventually, a funnel of experts coming from these different sectors should be created with a very clear mandate. To what extent? What is our goal? And in my opinion, the goal, especially for a developing country like the Philippines, is something that we all mentioned: to reduce poverty and inequality. minimum basic needs reduction of HDI. And so if we sit down together and realize that there is an opportunity to get, if we focus or anchored our goal in that component, I think it will be natural for these three sectors, not just the government, but also the private and the academe to be together. Sarah, you are muted.
There we go. Thank you very much, Dr. Monterola. Now, before we open the floor to questions from the rest of the participants, maybe each of you can give like 2 to 3 sentences of what the main message that you would want to give. It's going deeper from the talks that you had earlier. Let's start with Dr. Sonobe.
Thank you very much. But my main message would be, just I hope that PCC will strengthen the power capabilities. That kind of thing. Good luck.
Thank you, Dr. Sonobe. Ms. Ikia In.
I think perhaps I would just summarize my key message in terms of one, I think building up internal capability is critical, and that has to go into both. And I think we don't need to limit it to internal. I think a lot of times, hopefully, we can also borrow externally in terms of looking around to see who are the experts in the country and also external to the country. And two is to constantly put in a lot of resources to understand the market. I think intervening in the market without a good understanding, I personally feel it brings a worse outcome rather than not intervening. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. In. Dr. Monterola.
I from my end, I go back to the most fundamental thing, and that is we want to improve the HDI, the Human Development Index of our countrymen. And improving this HDI, that is, I guess, one of the main functions of competition. 62% of the jobs are coming from MSMEs, or less than 2% coming from MNCs. Unfortunately, AI, if we will not intervene and allow the government to create and the MNCs to create institutions where MSMEs can go for help, okay, we will increase this divide. So to me, my main focus is that we should really do something to make sure that this new digital transformation and AI can be accessed by all the players. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Monterola. Chair, Mr. Azada, please.
Yeah, just want to link what I was saying a while ago in response to the previous question to, I guess, policy, especially competition policy, right? I think any policy framework for the telecommunications industry, including internet service provision, I think has to be one that incentivizes investment. I think because, as I said, we're still underserved. There's still a long way to go, but also ensuring sustainable competition, right? But there also has to be policies around driving demand. So if the broader government, and regulators, not just PCC, can think about encouraging digitization of industry. I mean, the fact that we still need to have paper ORs and all of those things, right? That limit digitization is a stumbling block, right? So if we can further digitize industry, and the BSP, the Banco Central, is doing a great job at spearheading that, hoping other industry regulators can do the same, so that industry will leverage cutting edge technology. That will also encourage the growth of our sector, which is the lifeblood, the guts of everything else that Dr. Monterola, Dr. Balisacan, and Ms. Ng and Dr. Sonobe were talking about, right? So both on the demand side and also supply side, I think that's where the regulation has to come in.
Thank you, Mr. Azada. Chair Balisacan, 2 to 3 sentences.
Yes, a big challenge for for 3 sentences, but okay. Clearly, robust enforcement of competition law and policy during the pandemic and beyond is critical to enhancing consumer welfare and building the economy back better. As I said earlier, the the pandemic has exacerbated existing inequalities and even has created new ones. And the digital economy is an important contributor to that. It's not because it's generically like that, but it's the lack of investment, the poor investment climate, the competition issues in that industry that needed to be addressed, and so ramping up investment and ensuring that there is a level playing field, that barriers to entry are eliminated, will make that transition to a more inclusive, more resilient economy.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair Balisacan. Now we open the floor to questions from our participants. We have one question, and this is from Emiliano Neri Jr. He is a former president of the PES. Okay, his question is, how do friction costs and risks faced by Philippine telcos compare with Singapore and other sovereignties? And how does this lead to adjustments in regulation? Local governments in the Philippines can make it difficult for telcos to get licenses, putting up connections, for example. Thanks. Ms. Ing, maybe you can answer this.
This is a little bit difficult, challenging for me because I'm not familiar enough with the Philippines situation. But I do think that at least in Singapore, I think we have a sectoral regulator, and I think in that case, it's very much driven by trying to open up the market as much as possible. So I think very early on in year 2000, I think the market has already been opened up. And I think fortunately for Singapore, we do not perhaps suffer from an additional layer of local government's regulation. So I think that make it more straightforward. And because there's no restriction in the number of licenses, so I think the telco market has been quite good in terms of the number of new entries, the level of fees, charges have been dropping significantly. So in fact, I think Singapore suffers from another problem of being a small market and being able to sustain. How many competitors can we really sustain with such a small market? So actually, we suffer from another problem, which is the market size. But I think Philippines will have its own issues. Perhaps other speakers on the panel would be more suitable to answer this question.
That's right. Thank you, Ms. Eng. Maybe Chair Balisacan, Dr. Monterola.
I think the common problem being raised is the bureaucratic hurdles that investors have to face, and this also applies to telco services, infrastructure. Recently, the ICT, among other agencies, including PCC, have issued a joint memorandum circular regarding the installation of poles, underground fiber ducts, and cable laying. And this circular involved the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, the Department of Interior, Local Government, even and of course the NTC and the National Electrification Administration. Those agencies were basically involved in issuing permits and licenses, and they have committed through this circular. They have committed to reduce so significantly the number of requirements and the days, set a maximum number of days that this entire process of getting permits would entail. So hopefully that will help improve the investment climate, particularly on the supports infrastructure that that things like Benjamin Azada's company would need,
Yeah.
for expansion.
And maybe just to add to what Ms. Ong and Dr. Balsacan said, Dr. Sara, I don't know much about the telco, but I know about the energy landscape. Even in Singapore and in Germany, procurement is a problem, and the way they have solved it to some extent that make it better than the way the things are happening in the Philippines now is computerization, digital transformation, making things very fast and understanding where are the bottlenecks, for example. Just to give you an idea, I know about energy, I don't know about telco. From 160 signatures to be able to come up with a plant, you need 200 signatures now. And you know what happens that is wet signature, by the way. And that will take you 2 to 3 years just to have a 10 megawatt plant. You know how problematic that thing is. Now it will take you 10 years to actually recoup your capital. And you need 2 to 3 years to come up with all these signatures, and every step of the way, somehow there is corruption. So ease of doing business, clear transparency, digital transformation in the government, it will be very, very critical.
Thank you, Dr. Monterola. Mr. Azada, quick comment?
Yeah, no, I agree with what everyone said, but just one thing. We do have that tool in our regulatory arsenal, ARTA, Anti-Red Tape Act, Red Tape Act. So I guess it's just a matter of really enforcing it. Players trying to get what is due if according to the law. The Anti-Red Tape Authority is there to protect, and for us to Dr. Monterola's point, on our end, we've not let permits be an excuse for not rolling out. In our case, we have a whole team that is just dedicated to getting permits in the right way, right? And we project manage it. We have a database that say, okay, in order to enter a town, what do we need? Then we manage it very, very rigorously, and we do parallel processing. We apply to everywhere we can, all at the same time, and whichever comes first in terms of permits, that's where we go. But is there room for improvement in permitting? Of course, especially not so much maybe in the rollout, right? But because that's not time critical, but in repairs. If there is a fiber cut, right? Sometimes you need to get permission from a barangay or a town or whatever in order to just go to the road and do a repair. And the longer that takes, the longer our customers suffer.
Yeah. But the good thing, Benjamin, with Converge, sorry to interrupt, is you guys are a 260 billion peso company. You're big. You've increased your price from 15 to 35 today. But in most other MSMEs, they do not have that. They don't, especially those the new players. In fact, this is the reason why I think maybe PCC should look into this one. But one of the numbers that I've seen is that 32% of our tax breaks goes to MNCs. 32%. When in fact they only employ 2% of the employees of the country. So this should be, there should be a mechanism. I think Dr. Sonobe mentioned this a while ago. There should be a mechanism for the MNCs to actually give back for nation building.
Thank you very much, Dr. Monterola. And with that, sadly, we have to close our discussion. So we would like to thank everyone, our main speaker and panel of discussants, for a very dynamic and engaging session. Okay, so there we have it, everyone. This morning's discussion has brought to light the challenges and opportunities brought about by digitalization. Business models that are heavily reliant on digital technology or platforms are now challenging the existing concepts and categories of competitive and anti-competitive behavior. And this requires a rethinking of competition policy, especially regarding value creation, revenue generation, and even the use of data. Now, the challenge is to find this happy balance is fostering an environment that would be conducive to both digital innovation and pro-competition behavior to help ensure greater digital inclusion and enable us to build back better. We would like to enjoin our participants to accomplish an online evaluation form through this link that will be posted on the chat box, now flashed on our screen. This evaluation form is a requirement for participants to receive an e-certificate of attendance for the session. Before we close, may we request everyone to open his or her video for a photo op. Let's wait for the others. May we request everyone to please turn on your video.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, on behalf of the Philippine Competition Commission and the Philippine Economic Society, thank you for attending this session. We hope to see you in this afternoon's parallel and plenary sessions. Have a great and safe day.